Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome back to the Double Wave Yellows podcast. We are reviewing the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, and what a weekend it was. Joining me in the commentary box again is our Hodders and Tyson. Welcome to you both. And also making his debut with us is Prae. How are you doing, Prae, first of all?
They're good. They're really good.
Excellent stuff. I say it was a superb Grand Prix weekend that we were treated to last weekend, and obviously lots to talk about, which we'll get into shortly. Hodders, I think we were treated with the F2 race weekend as well.
I think we were utterly... that double weekend, we were utterly spoiled.
Absolutely. And Tyson, we've just watched back the highlights briefly to refresh ourselves, and I think it's fair to say there's a lot of stuff that we missed because it was just so much happening all the way across the field.
Yeah, just so much going on. I don't know how we're going to cover it all.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to cover it all in the planned out, but we will see what happens. Okay, so coming up on the podcast, we've got firstly the Formula 2 race weekend recap as the new format is analysed and digested by the panel. We've then got the review of the Formula 1 Bahrain Grand Prix. We'll have a look at each of the 20 drivers and how they did on the opening weekend of the 2021 season. We'll review who had a weekend to remember or one they'd rather forget in winners and spinners. And then we'll look finally at F1's talking points. So, first of all, the F2 headlines. Lawson winning race 1 on his Formula 2 debut. Piastri winning race 2. And then Zhou winning the feature race from pole position. Dan Tixon, an awful weekend involved in 3 collisions in each of the races. The stewards are earning their money, issuing 12 penalties across the 3 races. And we had battles all the way across the field. I say we're going to try and summarise this weekend briefly, but I think let's start with a positive note. Lawson winning on debut. Hodders, what a race he had. What a weekend he had.
Well, his whole weekend was very solid. That debut showed he had confidence. He knew what it was doing with the car, and I think it really showed the format at its best.
Yeah, so the new format, for those who are not aware, we've now got 2 sprint races on the Saturday and then a feature race on the Sunday. And I think it's fair. It's also understandable to say, Hodders, Lawson, he could have been on for a second win in the second sprint race, but unfortunately involved in a collision with Lundgaard and Djokovic, but still managed to battle back to a third place in the feature race.
Absolutely. His race 2 was very unfortunate. Having the collisions that he did were very unfortunate. He was on form, but he was on form at the time. But to come back at that position in the feature race, you can't really knock. A very strong weekend for debut indeed.
Indeed. So, Tyson, race 2, it was a good win for Piastri, but unfortunately it was marred by several collisions and a lot of penalties issued. But Piastri winning from Lundgaard and Zhou, who we will also mention briefly. So that was a good race to watch as well.
Yeah, really fun race, and there's battles up and down the field. The championship's wide open. Anyone could win it.
Yeah, and that's what we want to see. Unfortunately, the main culprit in amongst all of that, Djokovic, getting a 10-second penalty for causing the collision with Lundgaard and Djokovic. And then finally, Zhou qualified in pole position and won the feature race, going from lights to flag win. Prae, just a superb weekend for Zhou. That's the best way to start his Formula 2 season.
I'm extremely impressed with Zhou, considering the time that he put in from his pole position lap in qualifying. There was obviously that little bit of if he was going to get it or not, because he did go twice round after taking the checkered flag, which obviously the stewards are heavily against, but he had an absolutely incredible weekend, especially taking lights to flag victory in the feature.
And that's a very good point you raised, because that was something that the stewards investigated post-race. But what's unique to the Formula 2 weekend is that the Formula 2 sort of support paddock entry is located just after the turn 10 exit, and Joe just completely forgot. So he'd gone round by the time he realised he had to go past the start-finish line again to get back. So I think that Joe and his team officials were able to explain to the stewards what happened, and I think he was just hit with a reprimand. So those were all the positives from the F2 weekend. Unfortunately, Dang Tictum is the real bad guy on this weekend. He got a 5-second penalty for colliding with Drogovic in the first sprint race. He then collided with Schwartzman on the second sprint race, and then collided with Piastri in the feature race. Hodders, just a miserable weekend.
I mean, we're not the sort of crew to go against a driver, but he just did not have a good weekend in general. 3 collisions, and it's clear and we know he wasn't a very happy man either after each of them. I mean, I think we're glad for time delays on radio.
Yes, I think the bleep machine had smoke coming off, and just I think on each occasion he was sort of blaming the other driver, but it may well be that once he got back to the paddock and he's able to watch it back, he will hopefully take stock and be able to say, okay, yeah, I didn't have the greatest of weekends, and move along. Tyson, we did cover it. 12 penalties across the opening weekend, and the majority seemed to be for either speeding behind the safety car or under virtual safety car conditions. And this is something that if these drivers want to get to Formula One, they must get this out of their driving ability.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something they need to just tighten up with.
Mm-hmm. And I think, lastly, Prae, as we saw throughout the whole of the weekend, and as we saw with their F1 colleagues, we had battles up and down the field. It was literally, we don't know where to look next for the next overtake. It was a superb weekend.
This is one of the reasons why I love F2, is because of kind of how close they are. I mean, yeah, they are the best drivers and potentially going up to F1. You have to expect this kind of action coming from these F2 drivers. Honestly, like, it is incredible watching these drivers fight out.
Mm-hmm. And,
especially on a track like Bahrain.
And yeah, I think that the track definitely contributed to this, and hopefully some of the F1 team bosses would have been watching and would have been suitably impressed by what they saw from some of the drivers. So, the Drivers' Championship after the first round of races, Zhou leads by 41 points from Lawson on 30, Deruvula on 28, and Piastri on 21. Dang Tictum, despite an awful weekend, on 19, Vashor on 18, Lundgaard and Schwartzman on 16, and there are the rest of the drivers on the right-hand side of the screen. As for the Constructors' Championship, Carlin have a small lead at the top there, 47 points from Uni Virtuosi with 43, Prema on 37, High Tech on 30, and ART on 24. So now to the main course, the F1 Bahrain Grand Prix review. And, well,
Lewis Hamilton!
Yeah, the world champion.
Well timed.
Exactly. The 7 times world champion, winning the opening race for the first time since 2015. Track limits, though, a big talking point, which we are going to get into, costing Max Verstappen the win. Yuki Tsunoda, a F1 rookie, one of 3 scoring points on debut. Vettel had a shocker of a weekend, being penalised for a collision with Ocon. And another one for a shocker, Nikita Mazepin on debut, crashing out on lap 1 after just 3 corners. Well, let's have a look at each of the drivers one by one. And of course, we will start with the race winner.
Lewis Hamilton!
Thank you. Indeed, Lewis Hamilton.
You're going to get a lot of data. You're going to get a lot of crafty, I think.
We're going to get a lot of these sound effects coming throughout the season. Let us know in the comments section what you want to hear. We definitely want to know what you think. So yes, looking at Lewis Hamilton's weekend, had a very good opening weekend. Qualified second, just a fraction of a tenth behind Max Verstappen. Stayed in second for the opening stint, but then undercut him on lap 18 to take the lead. Hamilton then later pitted. took the lead back from Verstappen again on lap 40 and was able to just hold off Max to take the race win. As we said, the first time he's won the opening race since 2015. Prae, as you're providing us with these sound effects, what did you think of Sir Lewis Hamilton's opening race weekend?
He had a pretty good weekend. I think obviously it was a shame. Well, it wasn't really a shame, but Verstappen obviously getting pole position just by such a little margin. The one thing that I feel about that is specifically, this might actually bring out the best in Lewis Hamilton that we haven't seen for a while. The fact that he's actually got competition. So I think there's good things coming from Lewis, and it might not be a case of he's in the best car, he's going to blow out the entire season. So hopefully, we get to see a little bit more of an aggressive Lewis Hamilton, which I'm looking forward to in the upcoming season.
We hope
very, very much so.
Yeah, we hope so. I mean, so just looking at the qualifying results here, Verstappen taking pole with a 1:28.997, Hamilton 29.385, so less than 0.4 of a second, and which we actually will cover in a minute. Verstappen had damage to the car throughout qualifying, so really, really impressive. But it's an interesting point you raised there, Prae, in that anyone who didn't see the result, they were just saying Hamilton win from Verstappen. Oh, another dominant Hamilton win. It was far from it, as we're going to talk about.
From dominant.
We're going to talk about later on. Yeah, this was. If this race is an indication of what's to come throughout the 2021 season, my goodness me, have we got a superb battle on our hands. Moving on to second place, Max Verstappen. Back-to-back pole positions for the first time in his Formula One career. He led from pole until lap 18 when he pitted. Retook the lead from Lewis Hamilton on lap 29. And the big moment, past Hamilton on lap 53, but unfortunately just ran wide at turn 4, which meant he had to hand the place back. Tyson, we were screaming with joy that Verstappen appeared to get past. Unfortunately, when the camera showed the replay, it was an open and shut case. Verstappen had to let Lewis back past.
Yeah, it was just very unfortunate for Verstappen because I thought Red Bull were on it all weekend. They had the advantage over Mercedes, but I think Mercedes just got the strategy right in the end.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Verstappen, he was fastest all 3 practice sessions, fastest in qualifying 1, only fourth fastest in qualifying 2, and qualifying 3 just absolutely nailed it. And as we've said, he'd run wide at turns 1 and 2 during qualifying 1, and Christian Horner later alluded he'd actually managed to do a fair bit of damage to the underfloor, which cost him about 1 or 2 tenths of a second per lap. So that would have been interesting to see what would have happened. Obviously, he got pole position anyway, but that would have been interesting. The Verstappen battle, it was so good because as we saw in the race, I mean, by the time he completed his second stop, with 16 laps to go, Hamilton was about 6.5 seconds in front. 4 laps later, it's down to 3.9 seconds. Lap 51, he gets into DRS range. And then, as we saw, lap 53, Verstappen does get past him, but he does go over the track limits, which we will talk about in a bit at turn 4. And he is told quite clearly by race control that he must let Lewis back past, because Verstappen was saying on the team radio, just let me go, I can make the 5 seconds up. But Hodders, I think if Verstappen had ignored an instruction from race control as well as going over the track limits, I think Max would have been in a sizable problem there.
Yeah, I think that was the thing, is that he did do what race control told him, which is what Formula 1 drivers have to do to obey. Although obviously it'll be a talking point in the future as to whether race control should have hammered down about that turn 4 earlier in the race. I mean, I remember even earlier in the race, I think it was about lap 32, his crew was saying, oh, they're cutting turn 4, and he was actually questioning, are we illegal to do this?
Yeah, and I say it's a big talking point which we will get into later in the podcast. Hodders, I will stay with you, and we will talk about the third place driver, Valtteri Bottas. And I think it's fair to say that Bottas's long pit stop on lap 31, 10 seconds or 11 seconds rather than the usual sort of 2.5 seconds that we're used to. That had a big effect on the race because had Bottas's pit stop gone to plan, he could have gotten in between Lewis and Max.
Yes, I think for the next couple of races, they'll forever be cursing that front right not coming off properly. I mean, for those who didn't see the race, what happened is in his pit stop in lap 31, the front right tyre would not come off. So they had to, raise the car again, try again. And I think that affected the race for him. I think he might have been in further contention had it not been for that long pit stop.
Yeah, but what was a sort of a runners-up prize, if you like, is that he stops again on lap 54 to put a set of mediums on and set the fastest lap on the final lap to get that extra bonus point. Prae, we're going to come back to you. P4, Lando Norris. The McLarens were up there all weekend long.
My boy Lando Norris. He's my favorite person on the grid right now. Like, genuinely, I'm so happy that he had a great race to finish P4. I think with the addition to the Mercedes engines within the McLarens, the Mercedes cars are going to do incredibly well. And Lando has proven himself over the past 2 seasons that he's been in that he is a very, very capable driver. So I'm predicting a Lando win for this season. Ooh. I'm predicting a Lando win.
And you know what? That is something that we wouldn't necessarily need one of those wacky races for. It only would need a slip up from Mercedes or Red Bull.
From basically Hamilton or Verstappen. Because I think just by looking at, like, say if it was Lando versus Bottas, I think Lando has it. Yes, Bottas is good, but I think there are moments for him where he can and will struggle. He's obviously Bottas is wanting a championship, but Lando's new and he's hungry to prove himself. And he's I feel this season is his chance to dominate, especially against, his new teammate, Danny Ricciardo.
Yeah, because that's the key bit. He's up against a race-winning teammate in Danny Ricciardo. However, in the opening, so this is the notes I've got for Lando. He passed Ricciardo, Gasly, and Leclerc in the opening 9 laps, and he was in the top 5 throughout the whole of the race. With the exception of the pit stop sequence. So Lando could be. I think his aims will probably be, to get a few podiums this year, and obviously if anyone slips up at the front, Lando will need to be there to potentially be on the top step of the podium, which I think, whether you're a Lando fan or not, I think it's always good to see a new driver on the top step of the podium. We saw it twice last year, we could see it happen this year. Tyson, I'll come to you for the next one. Sergio Perez. He had a bit of an eventful race, didn't he?
Yeah, sure did.
So we'll just quickly walk through, and I'd say I've got a lot of notes for this one. So his car just went kaput on the formation lap, which caused an aborted start. We rarely see those in Formula One. He managed to get the car going again, but obviously because he's caused the aborted start, he's had to go and start from the pit lane. But he's managed to start from the pit lane. He took his first stop during the safety car period, passed Leclerc late on. He's managed to score points on his Red Bull debut, and he was voted the Formula One driver of the day. I think it's fair to say Perez, apart from a sloppy qualifying where he qualified 11th, he had a respectable weekend.
Yeah, he did well to come all the way up through the back. The talent's always been there. I just never felt he's had the car underneath it. Now he's got the car. We're going to really see what he can do this season.
I think it's fair to say also no excuses because, as you say, he has the car. He has a potential race-winning car.
Indeed.
So he needs to be up there. He also needs to be sort of getting closer to Max. I mean, he did have a sloppy qualifying, as we mentioned, but with Red Bull, those excuses do not last long, and Red Bull are notorious. They are notorious for getting rid of drivers who just are not up to standard. Hodders will come to you. Charles Leclerc, P6. He overtook Bottas at the start, as we saw. Terrific roster. Unfortunately, after the VSC restart, Bottas got past him, and from there, it was a bit of a quiet race for him. Qualified 4th, unfortunately dropped back to 6th. An average weekend for Leclerc in terms of the result that he would want, but it's good to see Ferrari back up there.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying in the season preview that I think I remember saying that Ferrari really needs to book their ideas up. I mean, 6th is consistent, it's a strong start. It was a quiet weekend, and sometimes in the first weekend, you want it quiet. Not the greatest result for him, but he's not going to take too much stick for it at the same time.
No, absolutely not. Prae will come back to you for this one. P7, Danny Ricciardo. His debut for McLaren. Always good to finish your first race with a new team in the points, and Danny Ricciardo certainly did that. A good strong weekend from the Honey Badger.
Especially being in a brand new car with a brand new team after coming away from Renault after a year or two. Was it 2 years?
2 years. 2 years. Yes.
2 years when he was in with Renault. I feel with obviously Danny being a previous race winner, he has the potential to be potentially up to the top 3 within races. I feel kind of with this race, he's still potentially trying to get used to the car, but still strong performance from Danny Ricciardo. I'm just looking forward to things to come from him.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say that Danny Ricciardo and Lando Norris, they will sort of bounce off each other and they will push McLaren on.
They're possibly the best teammates to have with each other. Honestly, I Lando and Sainz were good, but I think Lando and Danny are better because they're just so funny, especially at that time when Danny made Lando cry with laughter in an interview.
Yeah, we've seen that. I mean, yeah. We've got so many characters on the grid. You know, we're used to having these drivers that are sort of very much sort of coached by the team and what to say and how to say. But yeah, we've got the likes of Norris and Ricciardo and Sainz, Leclerc, who they will speak their mind, but also they have great character. And yeah, we like seeing those sort of people on the grid. So Hodders, P8, former McLaren driver Carlos Sainz, points on Ferrari debut, so that's always a good way to start.
Absolutely. When you're going into Ferrari, there's always the expectation that you will hit the ground running, and hit the ground running he did.
Yeah, I mean, a solid weekend. Qualified 8th. I don't really think he got into any sort of real spot of bother. He's hit the ground running. He's sort of set the bar for where his performances need to be going forward. Tyson, I think fair to say our driver of the day. P9, Yuki Tsunoda. I will just go through the notes I've got on here. So, points on debut. He passed Lance Stroll on the final lap. The first Japanese driver to score on debut, the youngest Japanese driver, and the first driver born in the 21st century. Yuki Tsunoda, what a driver we have on the grid.
Yep, I am really happy that he got to see that AlphaTauri because he showed in Formula 2 he can get it done.
Yeah, and we saw some of his exploits obviously in Formula 2 last season. Interesting that he's in the sort of the Red Bull program because obviously of the links with Honda, but Yuki Tsunoda could well be a driver to watch, not just for seasons coming forward. This season, he could be a surprise.
Absolutely, and AlphaTauri, they've got a good car this year.
Yeah, I mean, AlphaTauri, I think they've pretty much been running top 10 all weekend. Gasly obviously qualified 5th, which we'll cover later on. Yuki had a rough qualifying too, because we thought, for all ends up, he was getting through to Q3, but for whatever reason...
in Q1 he got a P4 time, didn't he?
He did, yeah. We were watching...
I was surprised.
Yeah, we were watching that. And we were all thinking, oh, could he just about get through to Q3? He puts a P4 lap time on the board. I thought, hang on a second, it's not could he get through, it's where's he going to be?
It's where he's going to get in Q3. And then he had a shocking qualifying too. But I think it was not to his own credit. I think it was he kind of got hindered by yellow flags, wasn't it?
Yeah. There was a couple.
I think he was on the wrong tyres as well.
Yeah. So qualifying is just unfortunate. He goes out for his sort of hot lap in Q2, and he gets severely hindered by sets of yellow flags in 2 corners on the final lap, which is unfortunate. Hodders come to you for P10, Lance Stroll. Aston Martin debut, and Stroll gets them into the points. A solid, reasonable weekend from P10.
Yeah, a very solid start. A point is a point. I mean, possibly you could say unlucky or maybe slightly outskilled by the aforementioned Yuki Tsunoda on the final lap as well, which is a very nice manoeuvre, it should be pointed out. And I don't think he'll begrudge Yuki 9th either. 10th is 10th, and point's a point.
Yep, and Daddy Lawrence will be pleased to have to be on the scoreboard. Okay,
Mr. Incredible.
Indeed. So, right. So that's all the point scorers. We'll now come to those who were unlucky to finish outside the top 10. And first, with Prae, the oldest driver on the grid. No, sorry, the second oldest driver on the grid, Kimi Räikkönen, qualified P14, P11. He had a solid race, didn't he? Nothing really to write home about.
Now, the one thing that I have echoed throughout pretty much this weekend is what on earth happened to the Alfa Romeos? They are quick as anything this season. I think in qualifying, you had Raikkonen and Gio up there. I don't think they got into Q3, did they not?
So Raikkonen qualified for P14. Giovinazzi was P12. But I think Q1.
They were like 10th and 11th.
Just looking on the F1 website. Yeah, so Giovinazzi was well inside the top 10. And I think Raikkonen was far off either. So yeah,
I'm quite surprised by Alfa Romeo, and it kind of shows, especially when you have such an experienced driver as Raikkonen. I think there is a good chance that Alfa Romeo could net a fair little bit of points if they creep into the top 10 every so often.
And it's a good point you raised there, Prae, actually, because Alfa Romeo last year, partly hindered by the Ferrari, they just had an awful season. So the car appears to have just leapt forward. So instead of previously they were struggling to get out of Q3, they're there or thereabouts in Q2 and failing to get out of Q1. So interesting. So they could be drivers to watch. I think similarly for Giovinazzi, Hodders, let's say nothing overly spectacular, just a solid weekend, qualifying P12, finishing P12.
Solid and consistent. And to be fair, I mean, I can see him challenging Kimi for position throughout the season as well. I mean, look at last season, they were pretty much tied on points, and the only reason that Kimi had slightly higher position was more 9th place finishes. But the fact that Giovinazzi also out-qualified Kimi on half the races last season, one to watch in the Alfa Romeo side.
Indeed. So,
and you do say that your biggest rival is your teammate, so that's probably going to be a little bit of a battle to watch.
It's the one you've got to win, your teammate battle. Tyson will come on to probably one of the unluckiest drivers, finishing P13, Esteban Ocon. It could have and should have been higher, qualified P16. He was running fairly well until on lap 45, he overtakes Sebastian Vettel into turn 1 and then whack.
Yeah, that was just really unfortunate for Ocon. He was having a good race.
But that's not good if he's qualifying P16. He needs to be making Q2 appearances on a regular basis. That's something he needs to reflect on. Prae will come back to you. So George Russell, P14. He qualified 15th, so he's continuing his Mr. Saturday tradition in that he is getting through to Q2, and I think it could have been higher up the grid, but for the yellow flags in qualifying. A solid weekend for George.
Now, the one thing you have to remember as well is Russell's currently in a Williams, and Williams are notorious for struggling with their car at the moment. So the fact that Russell's getting up to P14 as well, and you can pretty much guarantee that's actually on his own merit, and has nothing realistically to do with the car. Obviously, Mercedes has said that they're putting more resources into Williams this season, so you never know. We might actually see Russell get into the points potentially. I'm hoping so, because Russell at this point, he deserves it, and I think Russell also deserves a seat at a higher team. And Hamilton's on a 1-year contract.
Same as Valtteri Bottas as well, and that is going to be something to keep an eye out for this year. Right, I think I'm going to ask all three of you to contribute to this one. Prae, I'll start with you first. P15, Sebastian Vettel. Oh dear. Prae.
Seb had an absolute nightmare of a race. Honestly, the collision with Ocon, the fact that he was given 5 penalty points onto his super license as well. This has been probably one of the worst races Vettel has probably been a part of, and he still finished. But at what cost? There's still so much going against him.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't just a bad race; it was a bad weekend. A 3-place grid penalty for ignoring double yellow flags in qualifying 1, which is very, very, very naughty. His argument he put to the stewards was pretty flimsy, to say the least. So that dropped him from qualifying 18th, compared with his teammate in 10th, down to 20th, so back of the grid, and that's already 3 penalty points on his licence. He then gets another 2 for just a ridiculous collision with Ocon. Ocon passes him down the start-finish rate, DRS, clean as you like, and Vettel just chops across to wipe out Ocon. And the daft thing about on the team radios we've heard that he says Ocon moved into him.
See, I wonder if Vettel was frustrated. I wonder if Vettel was frustrated and decided to take it out on someone else.
I mean, that could well be the case. But Tyson, if that is the case, someone needs to sit him down and have a strong word with him, because this is a 4-time world champion making not just ridiculous basic errors that you do not expect from a 4-time world champion.
Absolutely not. It's not the start to his Aston Martin campaign he would have wanted. Didn't get out of qualifying 1, had a shocker of a race. Just not a good start at all.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, Hodders. If Sebastian Vettel doesn't make his, get his act together, could we see him replaced mid-season?
I would say never on that one. I mean, he's already vulnerable with having that bad weekend. It will have the team thinking already.
To make also another point onto kind of the Aston Martin thing. Obviously, with being called Racing Point and having the pink Mercedes, they were doing extremely well last season to get close to that 3rd place in the constructors, narrowly missing out to McLaren. And for them to finish 10th and 15th respectively, has something gone wrong with the design of this car? Or is there some external factor?
I mean, tongue-in-cheek, it could be that they haven't got the Mercedes brakes this year. So that could be.
We would like to make an appeal against your rear brake ducts.
Yeah, they're not working. Right, so moving further down the grid, P16, Mick Schumacher, and we came across a rather interesting little stat, Hodders, whilst we were sort of doing our homework for this.
The interesting statistic is that compared to his uncle and father, he's had the best finish for a debut, considering that his father didn't finish his first race. So you can take that into consideration.
Yeah, so Michael Schumacher was out on lap 1 at the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix with a clutch problem, and Ralph at the 1997 Australian Grand Prix only managed to complete 1 lap, so not great. So yeah, Mick Schumacher coming home P16. He qualified 19th, obviously bumped up to 18th with Vettel's penalty. He outqualified his teammate, which is always a good start, and unfortunately he spun at turn 4 just after the safety car restart.
My one fear about Schumacher is he gets buried by Haas. And what I mean by that is buried, and then the top teams don't kind of see him. You know what I mean? Because yes, I understand it's Mick Schumacher, the son of Michael Schumacher, but of course you can't just judge it off of that. So hopefully Schumacher kind of makes it out there, makes an impact, so that maybe later on down the line, maybe a Ferrari seat.
Well, we'll see. I mean, he's part of the Ferrari Academy, so that may keep him in good stead. And it may well be that, okay, if it doesn't work out at Haas, there may be a seat that opens up at Alfa Romeo. We will see there. Tyson Pierre Gasly, the second last of the classified finishers. Qualified P5, had a superb qualifying, and unfortunately hit the back of Norris, I believe it was, just after the safety car restart, lost his front wing. Let's face it, you lose a front wing, you have to come in pit. That is pretty much race over, and then he retired just before the finish, probably wanting to conserve the wear on the engine and gearbox. Unfortunate for Pierre. What do you think, Tyson?
Yeah, very unfortunate. As I've said before, AlphaTauri, they've got the car this year. Pierre Gasly, you won a race last year. I think we may see it again.
Yeah, just got to wait and see with that one. And then the last of the finishers, Hodders, Nicholas Latifi, qualified P17, finished P18, a mechanical problem causing him to retire just before the end. Again, nothing really to write home about for Latifi.
Yeah, I think it was just unfortunate the turbocharger decided to go push it towards the end. Nothing really to write home. A race is a race, and you got classified at least.
He did indeed. And again, I think it was one of those ones where the team retire him just to restrict the wear on the engine and the gearbox. We're going to have a look at the two non-classified finishers. Firstly, Fernando Alonso on his return. Qualified P9. He was running solidly in the top 10 throughout the race, and then a plastic bag of all things causing his brakes to overheat. Prae, an impressive return. Fernando has not lost it.
No, he still has it, and he has shown that he can still perform to the best of his ability. Obviously, taking a 2-year break, going off to IndyCar, trying to get a victory in the IndyCar 500, because trying to get that triple crown. He's trying to get the triple crown, but decided to come back to Alpine.
It's Alpine, yeah.
Alpine. Renault, different colours. Yeah, he still has it, and he can definitely get into the points. I reckon he can definitely get into the points.
Yeah, a few strong points finishes I think would be expected from Fernando, and at 41 years of age, it's impressive that he hasn't lost it. And
him and Raikkonen are the oldest on the grid, right?
Yeah, Fernando's 41, Raikkonen I think is 39, I believe.
Correct.
Okay, good. And I think another one, the last one, the first one out that we're all going to weigh in on, and I think Hodders will start on this one. Nikita Mazepin, or as social media were dubbing him, Nikita Maz's spin. Not just for the race, he had a mare of a race weekend. Spinning in practice. I think he spun in qualifying 1. He overtook drivers in qualifying 1 when you're not really supposed to. Qualified 20th, obviously bumped up to 19th, and as some someone cruelly said on social media, he managed to complete more race formation laps than actual race laps, retiring or crashing out on the exit of turn 3 on lap 1. Hodders, I think, as you said, ouch.
Yeah, he had an awful weekend, and that's not to discredit him, but he had an absolute stinker of a weekend, and unfortunately, it's not the sort of thing you want on your debut either.
No.
You just don't want that to happen on your first weekend. I mean, hopefully he'll learn from it for Imola, but we do not want deja vu. But he is being watched for more than one reason.
Yeah, and Prae,
for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and Prae, we talked about it in the pre-season podcast. He was already under the microscope because of his social media posting. This will not have helped him one bit.
No, not at all. I think with obviously the stuff that's happened with Mazepin from his transition from F2 to F1, he needs to perform. He needs to perform. There is obviously that kind of I've kind of looked into it a little bit, and I have a seeking suspicion that Haas will change name going out and will change owner going into the 2022 season. But he needs to perform. I mean, that meme, by the way, of Mazepin is picked up so much. There's actually a website that you can go on to that will show you every spin that he has.
Oh dear!
In every race of the season.
Oh dear! I think that might be having a lot of.
And we'll give you the footage.
Oh dear! That's not good. I think one thing we'll touch, just to sort of bring a bit more of a serious light to it. Mazepin's crash was eerily familiar to Grosjean's crash on the exit of turn 3 last year. So I mean, when we were watching the race back, I think my reaction was something along the lines of, "Oh goodness, no," because that was scary. It was a big crash.
Haas just don't like turn 3.
No, and actually, it was noticeable that the Haas just seems to be not just Mazepin's but Schumacher as well. They just seem to be spinning off on the traction. I think Prae, you had a really good factor. I think it was like 90% of the.
Oh, yeah, most of the track, your acceleration points are on turns, and F1 cars hate that because if your wheel is not straight, your traction doesn't get off, or you'll either have too much traction and your wheels obviously turned to the right or to the left. You go off in that direction because it grips too hard and you just spin. So I think obviously Schumacher and Mazepin, being rookies to the scene, didn't quite grasp that, and we're kind of still getting used to F1 cars. I mean, we can't obviously talk Tsunoda in that light because he's points scoring in his debut. But for Schumacher and Mazepin, I just think they need to kind of take it a little bit easier, get used to the car, and then worry about picking up positions.
Yeah, and it's something that Haas are going to have to look into because it was alluded to by Martin Brundle. Haas have the worst car on the grid. That is not good. I guess they're kind of caught in sort of no man's land in terms of, do they try and improve the car for this year, knowing that they've got the huge reg changes coming in for next year?
Hang on, isn't the Haas car the same one from 2019?
Ooh, good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
Because they said that they were going to take the same cars from 2020 to 2021. But,
it's because basically last year, the rule change was supposed to be that the brand new F1 car design was supposed to be coming in for this year. Obviously, COVID has pushed that back a year, so that's where Haas have been really caught out by this.
But I don't know if Haas were going to make the change to the car from 2019. So potentially, the car that Haas have is the 2019 car.
A 2-year-old chassis, which is
it's
never good.
It's a 2-year-old chassis, and I don't know what Haas are thinking, not giving any, any development to the car, to make any improvements to it or anything like that. It just kind of seems to me that Haas have given up. And if that is the point, then Gene Haas needs to sell and have someone that will come in that will actually give them a little bit of a more competitive car.
Or it could well be that they are conserving the money or they're going to put all the money and the development into the 2022 chassis. We will wait and see. I say a lot of hypothesis and hyperbole to come across this season. So let's have a look at the drivers who had a memorable weekend. The winners first and foremost, and of course we have to start with the race winner. Thank you. The race winner, Lewis Hamilton. He had a terrific weekend. Him and Mercedes outdid Verstappen and Red Bull on the tyre strategy. He just about held off Max Verstappen for the race win, so we have to give him one of the winner allocations to the winner winners. Sergio Perez, again, a superb weekend for him. Unfortunate that the car conked out on the formation lap, but really got his head down. Same as last year, actually, didn't he? Hodders, was it you who had that little factoid there?
Yes, Sergio Perez, incidentally, it was at the Sakhir Grand Prix last year that he became the only F1 driver to ever win from last on the grid.
And it was last at the end of lap 1.
So you kind of have to think then, if Perez's engine didn't conk out and he had to start from the pit lane, could Perez have won that race?
That's a very, very good point, Prae. He could well, but P5 from the starting from the pit lane, and he took a stop under safety car. Very, very good performance and a very good result. And of course, we have to put in the last allocation of our winners, Yuki Tsunoda, a tip of the hat, and the double wave yellows driver of the weekend. Superb.
I tell you something, I cannot wait for Suzuka this year. Oh my god!
He's going to have a big.
And it's going to be there's going to be a crowd as well.
Yep.
Oh my goodness! And I'll tell you what, for Japanese sport as a whole, because obviously not many people will be able to go to this year's Summer Olympics. How good would that be as a feel-good factor for the Japanese crowd to turn up in Suzuka, and they have got someone to cheer on, not just any driver, but they've got someone who is really up there. So that would be.
Kobayashi was the last one, wasn't he?
Oh, and I remember the reception that the fans gave when he was finished on the podium. Just the whole of that long start-finish straight with just Japanese flags waving and lots of hooters going off. It was brilliant, and I hope we get to see that in Suzuka later this year. I think
Japanese fans are so passionate.
Oh,
They
Really are.
I'm trying to think, it is on the calendar this year. Suzuka is on the calendar this year. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain it is. Yeah.
Okay. As for the spinners, the drivers who had a race they'd rather forget. Yeah, unfortunately, right at the top there, Nikita Mazepin, an absolutely awful weekend. Pierre Gasly just so unlucky, just the lightest of taps with Lando Norris losing the whole of his front wing section, and he just plodded on.
Wings are fragile as anything.
They are. I mean, we saw the race. It was a nothing tap, but it just came off. It was one of those ones where if he did that again, it might just be a little bit of front wing cut. It was just the whole plane section, which was bizarre. And of course, our other spinner, Sebastian Vettel, just an awful
sandwich wrapper, eh?
Yeah, I mean, we could have had honourable mentions for Bottas in the spinner section for obviously that long pit stop. Fernando Alonso, I mean, how unlucky. I think it was like a sandwich wrapper, someone was saying, that got caught in his rear.
From what I read, it was a sandwich wrapper that got stuck in the brake duct.
I mean, how unlucky is that? Because he was on course for a couple of points, which would have been nice to see him back. But anyway, let's see. So, talking points, I think it's fair to say there's quite a few bits. First of all, let's have a look at the three rookies. We'll start at the back, working forwards. Nikita Mazepin, I think we've beaten him up quite a fair bit on this podcast. I think it's fair to summarise a poor weekend. He must do better.
Yeah, has to.
Very much so. Yeah, really needs to do better, or else his seat could be at stake. But I mean, I keep talking about potential ownership change. There's rumors flying around that Mazepin's dad is going to be taking over Haas.
I mean, he's already put a fair bit of money into the Haas team, so
And
unfortunately,
there's also a case of there's one person that could be leading that team, and I hate to say it, but it's Rich Energy.
oh goodness, so we saw what happened with that a couple of years ago, and I don't think we would want that to happen. So moving on to Mazepin's teammate Mick Schumacher, a respectable race weekend, I think it's fair to say.
I think it's fair to agree with that one. I mean, I remember Ferrari's principal saying, even at the end of last season, he reckoned that Mick would have a very difficult 2021. He didn't have the easiest of first races, but he will learn this season. He's there to learn.
Yeah, it's a learning season. It's a learning season.
He's still learning the car, so it's a major learning curve from F2 to F1. You've got more stuff. You've got overtake at ERS. You've got more power in the car going to the wheels, essentially, because obviously it's a hybrid car as well. There's a lot of things to take into consideration and a lot of learning to do as well. And I think this race just kind of goes to show that Mazepin and Schumacher are still in that learning curve.
And that's the thing with Schumacher in Formula 3 and Formula 2. It took him quite a while to acclimate himself to the car, but once he was used to it, he was flying.
Mm-hmm. And the third of the rookies we can't praise enough, Yuki Tsunoda. I think if someone had said to him, just after he'd signed the contract with AlphaTauri that he would score points on his debut, he'd have taken that. No problem. A superb weekend for the Japanese driver.
Agreed. One thing I did notice is I was reading an article that he was actually quite critical of his performance at that weekend. He thought he felt he made some mistakes on the first lap and could have done better, which actually we can't condemn him for. We can actually praise him for the fact that he's actually praising his performance already. That's the sign of a good racing attitude, and we want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And also a good sign that we've got a good F1 driver on our hands is that even in practice one, his radio messages were still being bleeped.
I was literally about to bring that up. He's already getting the swing of things with the radio messages, and he's already got the bleep machine on the go.
Yeah, but
complaining about, and I say verbatim, traffic.
You had to add that ready. The next talking point, Hamilton versus Verstappen. Let's talk about it from a race perspective first and foremost. Prae, what a battle we had between these two.
It was an incredible battle, back and forth, and the two drivers have shown over the course of the year, of the past couple of years, that they can battle, and they battle to the best part of it. And they have this kind of, well, I mean, I know they're rivals, but they also can have this little bit of a mutual respect kind of for each other. I mean, they still get the fists out and the elbows out as well. I'll push you off the track. I'll do the same back to you. But yeah, expect more of this type of battling, because it's going to go on and on and on. I finally feel like Red Bull have a competitive car to go up against Mercedes. And obviously Mercedes, they've been complaining over testing, practice, and qualifying. They don't feel comfortable with this year's car.
And yeah, we've seen hints of this over previous seasons. I think it was the 2019 Hungarian Grand Prix when Hamilton pitted onto the softer tyres and he had to chase Verstappen down and pass him, sort of reminiscent, I think, of Schumacher it was from years gone by. I think we saw a similar battle at last year's race in Budapest as well. So we've seen hints of this on various races, but it appears that we've got something. Tyson, would it be fair to say we have got a championship battle on our hands that is going to go to the last race?
I think we do, yeah. Mercedes, they're not looking comfortable. Red Bull, as I said, they were on it all weekend. Just unfortunate Max didn't get the win. And Hamilton, in the interview afterwards, he looks happy that he's got some competition.
Absolutely.
He's been dying for competition.
Yeah.
He's been dying for it.
Yeah, it's what the F1 fans all want. Something that actually that Martin Brundle alluded to in the Sky Sports commentary, I think is actually a very good point, is, we saw hints of this with Schumacher and Senna in the 94 season, at the start of the 94 season. Obviously, we never got to see what would truly have happened, but we've got something that we're licking our lips at, and I can't wait for the next Grand Prix, the Imola race in 2 weeks' time.
Oh,
Oh, the fact it's Imola as well. Oh, I love Imola.
And I tell you what,
so
Verstappen was
much.
so unlucky last year when his tyre went when he was chasing down. I think it was Hamilton, but we'll see. And the final talking point, and I think we're not going to go into this on too much detail because we are going to do a VSC podcast next week on this track limits. Hodders, I'll come to you first. This caused so much debate.
As I said earlier on, I mean, I still recall the team radio. It'd been exploited, maybe more than abused. And even on lap 32, turn 4, crew from Red Bull was saying to Verstappen, Hamilton, Mercedes are cutting on turn 4. We may as well do it until we're told not to. And then Max was saying, are you sure that's legal? It's a shame it wasn't hammered down earlier in the race more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think what didn't help is, again, we'll go into a bit more detail on this next week, but the drivers are given notes from the race director on the Thursday night of each race weekend. It's effectively sort of the regulations that are relative in relation to that event. So it might be something to do with the pit lane entry. It might be to do with where the pit lane closed signals are located, if the safety car is out, and also track limits. And what was really, really bad is that it was a very ambiguous note that was given by Michael Massey as to what would happen with turn 4. As I say, we will look back into it a bit more. But Tyson, going forward, I think it's fair to say what the fans want, what the drivers want, what the teams want is consistency with this rules.
Yep, consistency. We had the same thing a few years ago with all the controversy of moving under braking, and they came down on that. They set out what the rules were going to be about it, and they penalised people who didn't follow those rules. That's what we need now with the track limits.
Absolutely.
But the other thing as well is that you set the track limits, live with it then. Don't change it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Live with it. If people are going to exploit that, that's on the FIA for not putting it there. Just
And the drivers do a track walk on a Thursday morning. The FIA, Michael Massey, the race director, and his colleagues, they walk it on the Wednesday, so they can, if they and the stewards can see, right, okay, this could be somewhere where someone could take advantage, make note of that. And if the drivers raise something in the drivers' briefing for something that they want to, if the drivers are wanting that sort of stuff to be clamped down, then take that into account. Anyway, we're probably going to have quite a rant about this next week. What we will do next week is say, we'll discuss obviously specifically what happened in Bahrain. We'll show you what it shows in the sporting regulations, what it shows in the 2 sets of driver notes that were given out in Bahrain, and obviously we'll look at possible tracks going forward, including Imola. So the F1 Drivers' Championship as it stands after round 1, Lewis Hamilton. Thank you. With, I wouldn't say maximum points, 25 out of 26 points. Verstappen on 18. Bottas with 3rd and the fastest lap point in 3rd. Norris, Perez, Leclerc, Ricciardo, Sainz, Tsunoda and Stroll rounding out the top 10. Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, the 2 Alfa Romeos in 11 and 12. Ocon, Russell, Vettel, Schumacher, Gasly and Latifi, the other classified drivers, Alonso and Mazepin, not quite classified because they failed to finish. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes again lead the championship, 41 points. They have led both championships since Germany 2018. Red Bull Racing on 28 points, McLaren on 18, and then Ferrari, AlphaTauri and Aston Martin rounding out the point scorers. Alfa Romeo, Alpine, Williams and Haas all in the championship. So coming up on Double Wave Yellows, we have got next week, as we mentioned, the VSC, very special content podcast, having a look at track limits. The weekend after, we have got the Imola Grand Prix. The weekend after, we will, of course, be back to review all the action. And then the week after that, we have the Portuguese Grand Prix. That was an absolute belt of a race last year. Hopefully it's as good this year. Final thoughts from the panel. Prae, we'll come to you first. What a weekend we have had.
It was brilliant. Good to see Sonoda up there, obviously, with him. Well, coming out of the gates flying. Like, properly flying. It was a great debut from him. Hamilton off to a great start in the season as well. And good to see Red Bull giving some competition to the Mercedes.
Absolutely. Tyson.
Traditionally, the first race of the season, it's good to see it back, but it doesn't always deliver. This weekend certainly delivered, and more.
Yeah, well said. And finally, Hodders.
As I said at the top of the shop, we've been utterly spoiled this weekend. I think the F2, and by extension in future weekends as well, I think the F3 and W Series of Support is going to work extremely well based on what we've seen this weekend. And F1 was a great start as well.
Absolutely. Well, my thanks to Hodders, to Tyson, and to Prae for their contributions. We will be back next weekend with the VSC podcast looking at track limits, and then again 2 weeks after that with the Imola GP review. Look after yourselves, be good, and if you can't, be safe. From all of us here at Double Wave Yellows, goodbye.